Hi, I'm Betty Woodman. A good question is, what makes the difference between thriving workplace cultures and those that are more toxic or even just deadening? And what can we do about it? What are the key patterns that get in our way when we're trying to create a culture of belonging? Over time, I've noticed predictable patterns in the workplace, patterns of belonging and patterns of othering. This led me back to grad school, where I did research for my master's and PhD, and then later applied within organizations. These patterns are prevalent in many workplaces and also other places as well. They are both obvious and subtle. The subtle ones we need to watch for because we can miss them and they can lead to more toxic situations. The obvious ones we're familiar with, right? So there's a tyrant or a bully who may yell and scream and kick people out of his or her office. It sets up a culture of fear and conformity. And new ideas are often stifled because people may not want to bring that to the attention of someone unless they know that person is already on board with it, because they don't want to be on the receiving end of all that. So the subtle ones we may miss, and the problem there is we won't may not do anything about it, and it causes the line to move back, and the situation can fester and snowball. So when we're talking about DEI in the workplace, these subtle patterns are critical to watch for. They cause people to feel unwelcome, to feel disempowered, and they're also really difficult to point to. And you'll notice at the bottom, there are a list of different types of patterns that you'll see there. And the first one, marginalization and credibility, I will describe an experience that kind of explains that. I was working on a consulting project with a large engineering tech firm, and there was a senior level executive and a more junior level but brilliant engineer who had been hired because of the patents he held and so forth. And this senior level person started a campaign of marginalization very subtly, began drawing attention to this guy always being a little bit late for meetings. Interestingly, I was going into a lot of those meetings at the time, and I don't ever notice the guy being late. And I remember thinking, what's this guy really talking about? I'm not seeing this. Well, eventually, the guy was a little bit late or coming in, certainly as the meeting was starting. And the senior level exec leaned back, looked at his watch, chuckled, kind of got some other people chuckling. And what he was doing was creating an in group, right? On something that's really ridiculous. And the problem is that he's causing all the people there to see this guy in a certain way and miss his brilliance, right? And these are the kinds of things that can fester and snowball. In this particular case, this man wound up eventually leaving the company. I don't know that he always knew what was being said, but he could certainly feel it and he could feel the chill. I've also seen this kind of thing happen in other situations with different dynamics. So, for example, related to neurodiversity, to race, to class, to LGBTQ, to gender, organizational level, right? Status in the organization, or even competing organizations within a business. And the question then is, what do we do about that? And, oops, where do we go from there? And one thing that's really helpful to remember when you look at the players in this is that the bystanders and followers together are most of the people in an organization or a business. The people that are the ringleaders are the minority of people. So in this slide, you already start to see the bystanders moving over closer to the target and the followers not far behind, still sort of associated with this bully. And there's a dynamic there to be aware of as well. But the point being, there can be strength in numbers. And that is really a useful thing to think about in shifting to a more positive culture. Three things to keep in mind, though, categories of things to do. Number one, everyone needs to be aware of these dynamics, particularly the subtle ones, because they're the ones that creep up. Number two, people need to recognize that other people are in the same boat. They feel the same way and they're not good with what's happening. And number three, people need to be ready with what to do. And that can be in the moment or longer term, so they can stand with other people and sort of take action. So many times in the moment, if we're not ready, something can be said and we might have the reaction, I can't believe that person just said that. And later you think, oh, I could have said this or that or done this. Well, you get another chance for that. So if you're ready, then tactically in the moment, you can come up with a measured response. And depending on who the players are, you might want to think about a strategic response that involves a couple people. So if you're like me, you've seen these patterns in the workplace. I eventually got to the point of thinking, how do we end this? It keeps on happening. And so I took all this learning and put it together into a framework called the Creative Power Path, which maps common patterns of belonging and patterns of othering. At the top, you see categories of companies. We want to be on the one on the right, the collaborative, which rests on the next one over, the creative. But when we get to the conforming, this is really a place to be aware that, if people are guarded and defensive, likely something has happened and it may be subtle. So to start looking at some of those patterns and figure that out. Well, you can be in a really good company with a really good culture, and many of you may be, and this stuff can creep in. The issue there, of course, is that the conforming is the gateway to the toxic. And that's where you get higher absenteeism and you get more turnover. And of course, which affects the bottom line, as well as the ability to have that kind of thriving culture you want. So moving back into the thriving culture, that's where people feel safe, where they feel free to be themselves and to make their contributions, where they're able to stand for their values and for the values of the business.